This is, the title of this conference is from science to therapy. And the little story I'd like to tell today is the other way around. I want to talk about my work with traumatized children with PTSD as and associated problems as a sort of opening of a whole issue of how we can help children with neuropsychiatric disorders. So I'd like to start from post-traumatic stress disorder because this is where I came from therapy to science. It was work that I did rather spontaneously in a particular situation I describe that led me to need to look at the science. I began my work in trauma with children by accident. In the early 1990s, I was working as a human rights activist in the Balkan region. I'd become aware of how cruel the war, particularly in Bosnia-Herzegovina, was becoming, a major genocide. And yet the world's press was not even beginning to deal with it, saying things like ancient ethnic hatreds. There were none. These were invented by power and money men to grab land and capacity, as everywhere else. There was not an enclave of extreme Islam in the middle of Europe, quite the reverse. Bosnia's Muslims drink more than I do. Young ladies dress in the same way as everybody else in Europe, and they're of the same linguistic and other ethnic origins as their neighbors. There is no difference. So anyway, I began working on really a human rights issue to try and stop the war, and that meant traveling to Sarajevo to work with the government there. I did not work with international agencies. They were not coping with it in any way, morally or intellectually. I worked for the Bosnian government, who were looking after the victims. Failed completely in our attempts to stop the violence and the genocide. Later on we had some results, but not at that point. And so in a kind of despair in this suffering city, walking around seeing dreadful things happening, particularly to children, no school, terribly traumatizing circumstances, shells fell in Sarajevo at random. So it's total terror. You never knew. When you left the house, you said goodbye for the last time to everybody. To try and cross a street, you had to run at random to avoid the snipers. And children had to, and to get water, you had to go through many, many difficult circumstances to get it from an artesian well. The rest of it was cut off. It was a medieval siege of a modern city. And the children, of course, suffered from not just no socialization. When they did go out, they saw terribly brutalizing things, bits of bodies hanging around, horrible stuff that was really not good for them. And so I thought, what can we do? And I talked to my friends there. I had quite a lot of friends, artists from before the war. And I said, can we do something for the children? This horrible situation. And they said, well, we've been thinking of this, but look at us, we're walking skeletons. It would have to be a collaboration. So we began a collaboration with children without any therapeutic goals. I wanted the children to be distracted from the horror around them. I wanted them to have some fun with us. And that kind of worked rather well. And we did a lot of creative work. We wrote songs, we played together, we sang. And I became aware of a rather strange wave of energy from the children that I couldn't quite explain. Something rather profound was happening. I needed to know what it was. But something very strong was occurring, and parents were giving us very, very strong feedback about how their kids were sleeping better after working with us. Things like that. And it was only when someone visited from the Ministry of Health, Dr. Cengic, came and said, and came to see the project and said, we think you've got a great therapeutic project here. He was the one who used the word, the T word. I didn't. And we didn't dare, but he said it. And from then on, we gave ourselves the permission to use the word therapeutic. Dr. Cengic gave us that permission. And he said, please expand it, please develop it. So we did. And one of the things I particularly wanted to do was because all of our work in Sarajevo had been drops in the ocean. And I knew that by 1993, 94, where there was the Washington Peace Agreement in a town I knew very well, Mostar, I thought, let's do a whole community. Let's do this for a whole community. So I went to the education authorities. The schools are beginning to reopen. I knew they had no creative arts teachers, so I said, please, can we have your creative arts hours, which is what happens in, they have a descendant of the Austro-Hungarian system there, Stunde. Can I have your creative arts hours? I know you don't have the teachers. I will deliver your national curriculum in music and arts, but I'll give you something else as well, which is what Dr. Cengic's agenda had been. So we developed kind of educational, general therapeutic program for the children. Eventually, I was able to turn that into a more professional operation. We built the Pavarotti Center with a music therapy department in it, where we were able to combine our general outreach work with real clinical music therapy. The only center in the world at that time addressing post-traumatic stress disorder through music therapy. So we developed that. Thank you. Now, the next bit, I could show you a film which lasts 5 minutes of Mostar at the time, or I could move on. Votes for seeing a 5-minute film. Oh dear, okay, right, we'll try and do that. So this is just an Australian film. It just gives you a flavour of what we were doing just after the war in Mostar and the generality of our work. I'll get to specifics in a moment. Here, I think I can click on this somewhere. It's going to come. Is it going to come? It is, and it's coming already. Beautiful, didn't even have to click. Thank you. Brilliant technicians. Again, a bit of sound. It's coming now, the sound. Sound will come with a picture.
For Mostar, this summer has seen a return to the good times. A respite, however fragile and temporary, from a tragic and complicated war that's torn apart the young lives of the country's children. A festival called Happy Street, designed to bring a little normality back to the lives of the children of Mostar. Alain Preguda lived through the war.
During the war, for that 4 years, I think, the people was like going crazy. They like didn't care about if they're gonna live or die. It was like, I don't know, it was like everybody is going crazy, even the little children.
Now at the age of 14, he's a reporter, working for children's radio and TV programs sponsored by UNICEF, which wants to help children rebuild their lives. At Happy Street, Alain meets the festival's organiser, Nigel Osborne, a Scottish professor of music and professional optimist.
Can you tell us please what they're doing here?
Well, this is something that our groups of Shura and Labour and War Child have put together.
Osborne is in Mostar for the charity War Child, and his plans, including the building of an international music centre, depend on continuing political harmony. Without it, the future's uncertain.
Yes, it's just beginning, it's nascent. We're beginning to develop the methods, and the idea is that in the new music centre in Mostar, we will get an international centre to develop that. Not to sort of patronisingly to attempt to be curing Bosnians. It's not that, it's to use perhaps some of the negative experiences here for something positive for the future.
At the centre of Osborne's work are Bosnia's schools, like this one in Dresnica. None of these kids had ever seen a puppet show before. Dresnica, where they live, is isolated in the hills further up the Neretva Valley from Mostar. War Child music teachers come up here weekly as part of the new post-war school curriculum. The puppets are a bit of a bonus. Nigel Osborne sees the programme as part of reconstructing young minds that war has scarred.
I think an enormous amount of pain and suffering. And Dresnica had suffered from the Yugoslav army at the beginning of the war coming through, and then when the incredibly unfortunate Croat Muslim War, or Croat Bosniak War, began, this place got hammered from the Croatian side very, very heavily.
Though he's a distinguished composer and professor of music now, it's not hard to see that at one stage of his life, Nigel Osborne was a primary school teacher.
out some words, and then you generate from that a rhythm, prosody, and then from that a melody.
Children selecting the notes of the melody.
What was funny today was that they immediately made up their own melodies spontaneously.
Little caterpillar.
It's sort of activities that at this age you do in a group in preparation for later on children sitting down individually with an instrument and picking out notes to be able to construct a melody. But by doing it in a group, you can show them how easy it is, and how it's just a case of
Here comes the caterpillar.
Until I'm satisfied.
It's all part of a network of projects threatened by the political breakdown in Mostar, a breakdown in which the certainties of the old are threatening the future of the young.
But the kids are extraordinary. I mean, the maturity of children, the depth of their thinking. I mean, it seems to me to be up to us to find some way of helping them to direct that knowledge, energy, and thought. I mean, it is something extraordinary about them. And of course, that could go totally wrong. It's like one of the situations in life where one has something extraordinary. And either it can be turned to something strong and good, but if it's not, of course, that energy will go to hell and shoot off in all kinds of directions that would be quite damaging. So it's our job.
The drama of the children of Mostar and the outsiders like Nigel Osborne who want to help them is being played out against a ravaged backdrop. At different stages of the war, Serbs from the heights on one side and Croats from the hills on the other poured artillery fire down into this valley town. There was hand-to-hand fighting too, for months, the hardest being in the Muslim enclave in what's largely the Croat west of the city.
So those experiences went reasonably successfully, and we were invited to many other theatres of conflict in Chechnya, Kosovo, working in Israel, Palestine, East Africa. A little of that in a moment. However, it became so strong with the reactions to what we were doing, it became necessary to understand what it was about, responsibility. Fortunately, I have a little bit of a medical background, some nursing, and I did follow a master's neuroscience course and various things like that, but I don't have great qualifications. But this led me into that area of my experience. First of all, we were dealing with a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder. What we didn't know at the time came out later. A study in 1998, Goldstein, Wampler, Wise, Harvard School of Social Medicine, found 95% of PTSD among my Sarajevo children, as I've been working with in the population. There again, the criteria, diagnostic criteria, Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, American Psychiatric Association, at that time DSM-4, there's 5 now of course, with the 4 diagnostic criteria: traumatic event, traumatic recall, avoidance, children being perhaps avoiding emotional engagement, and hyperarousal, being hyper alert and active. But I thought, as we wanted to investigate our effects, why it was we were having a bit of success here, was I looked at a wider framework, expanding really the biopsychosocial framework. Some very important bits here that get forgotten that are very important for music. Between biological and psychological, psychobiological. We've been talking about this today, the relationship of the mind and the body, very important for music. Then the one that everybody knows about, psychosocial, between psychological and social, but the other one that everybody forgets about, that actually Michael was talking about this morning, biosocial, how together and in groups we affect one another's bodies and minds. So I worked on that kind of basis, beginning with biological concerns. Here's an example from Africa. These, the children at the top are displaced people in Kitgum. This was at the time of the Joseph Kony LRA campaign in North Uganda, not so long ago, and down to the right is a boy soldier we rescued, now in a music art experience. That was in Ioma 2007. So looking at the biological point of view and trauma, we tend to, and this is a very important issue, the trauma industry, in particular the psychosocial part of it, tends to ignore the fact that this is an intensely physiological problem for children. for adults. And the evidence is very clear. For example, for dysregulation of the heart and autonomic nervous system, massive evidence from the United States from examining war veterans. I've just given some of the references there. But definitely the heart rate for your average sufferer, chronic sufferer of PTSD, will be 6 to 7 beats a minute faster than maximum than it should be on average. Of course, heart rate variability is a good thing, but being permanently locked as an average 7 beats above the norm is not a good thing. And I'm sure our cardiologist colleague will support that. So, what can we do? Well, music is highly interactive with the autonomic nervous system. And we can take, and there's evidence, massive evidence of this, and one of the things we can do is we can take children on autonomic journeys with music. We can go from relaxing to exciting and back again. And the journey is important. I agree with what Darren said. I think particularly with often traumatized children are rather locked where they are. And so the first thing we do is take them on a fun journey to being more excited and being more relaxed. And we sculpt them like musical pieces. I tell my students and trainees, your session should be like a symphony. You know, you should take the children through a sculpted journey, an autonomic journey. And do we have an effect? Yes. I'm gradually accumulating the evidence, but we have a fair amount of local GP evidence of improvement. Whether we can attribute that to our work alone, I don't know, and make no claims. But certainly the anecdotal evidence is very much in our favour. Going on, breathing, something very much ignored in the PTSD literature. Anybody who's worked with traumatized children knows the effect of trying to speak through breathlessness. We suspect vagal pathways in this. Thank you, Porges and others, for drawing our attention to these questions. And so there's little evidence about this from the PTSD literature, but everybody knows it's a big problem, and we can do very, very good things for this with music. First of all, just as music can increase tone in the sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions of the autonomic nervous system equally, and entrain the heart rate in some ways, not directly, but generally as it gets faster, the heart goes faster. Generally start do things like that. Just in the same way, the circuits of neurons in the medulla oblongata that control unconscious breathing, also music appears to be in very good contact with, and appears to be able to entrain our breath rate and regulate it even when we're not thinking about it. But even stronger, this is the magic bullet, though I'm sad to use such an aggressive metaphor. This is the magic flower. And it is this, that with music, when we're just sitting here, we're using probably 30% of our lungs. If we're working quite hard, maybe 70. There's only one activity where we use full capacity, singing. If we're singing well, proper diaphragmatic support. Probably one of the reasons we have singing is in order to use our lung capacity, exercise it, maybe evolutionary sense. And so with singing, we are able to use the conscious control of breath. Here we go. Here's some exercises for children who are not breathing properly. The first week, little Bosnian folk song. Tashun tashun tanana, palamachka stavana, ogrebala hasana. First week. Next week. I'll go a bit higher. Tashun tashun tanana, palamachka stavana, ogrebala hasana. Third week. Tashun tashun tanana, palamachka stavana, ogrebala hasana. We have extended the breath. And this works very well. I make no apologies for this. I don't even need scientific evidence. I just see it happen. It just works very well. And then dysregulation of movement repertoires. Very often, this is reasonably well documented in the literature, but not enough. With children with trauma tend towards one of two pathologies, which is either incredibly hyperactive, doing the cerebellum stuff on the back of the chair, leaning back, keep knocking things over, running around, screaming, or very, very withdrawn. This may well, of course, correspond to diagnostic criteria 3 and 4 of DSM-4, sluggishness and hypervigilance. So we have a fantastic way of helping children. If children come to us really dysregulated, we give them kick-ass West African music. You can't resist it. And we don't let them resist it. But what we do is we entrain them to more comfortable positions. To come to the point of my colleague here, we do entrain them to more comfortable. That slows down, and they'll take that once we've engaged them where we are. They are similarly for children who are incredibly sluggish and don't want to communicate with us. We might play little some simple communicative musicality, and we usually get there with them to enlivening them. So we can help with regulation of movement at first. Now, systems of stress and relaxation, of course, there are many systems involved in trauma, many that we've discussed: norepinephrine, noradrenaline, GABA, dopamine, serotonin. But the one that is most talked about, of course, is cortisol. And there's a paradoxical effect, as people here will know, that when somebody is first traumatized by a traumatic event, their cortisol levels go, as you would expect, sky high. That you would expect to happen. But then a weird thing happens. When it becomes chronic, they become lower than they should be. There are various adrenal exhaustion is the older-fashioned explanation. Probably it's more to do with the biochemistry of hippocampus attrition. In the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the regulating organ is the hippocampus, and the glucocorticoid biochemistry of this action has an attrition effect, a general shrinking effect on the hippocampus, not just the right side, the whole lot. And so it could be that this is part of it. Or maybe a natural defense mechanism, the body, for overheated HPA generation is to shut down the organ that gets it going. But this is a terrible thing to experience. And if you want, I mean, this helped me very much, this research, in that it helped me understand the children. I now understand, when many of the way they present themselves, how there is this mixture of hypervigilant, high tone in the sympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system all over the place, and yet lacking the biochemical resources to support it in synergetic systems in the HPA axis, not being able to support it, the one that communicates with the rest of the body. And so these are things that are really important. So there again, we can use lots of evidence for the regulatory effect of music on the HPA axis. And so there again, we don't have, as yet, much hard evidence, but we have lots of anecdotal evidence, and logic and a triangulation would be on our side. This is the pathology of PTSD. This is the effect that music can have on it. Here is the observed effect. We have a humble triangulation that we can work on, and I do hope to deliver the hard science very soon. We're on the pathways. One of my problems is I don't want to be invasive of the children. So occasionally we piggyback on medical things that are taking place, interventions that are taking place anyway, but we don't want to invade the church. It's not our job. We are musicians. We are there to make joy and pleasure, which is not in any way to take away from the much more important role of the physician, which is to intervene and to do what is necessary to make the child better. We must do it. Our discipline has to be to do it without violating in any way the child's body. I've developed some new sensors that I think is going to help me a lot, which are fun and are non-invasive, so we're going to get there with this. Then psychobiological and psychological concerns. I'll give an example. This is Palestine. This is the most overpopulated place on earth, Balata camp, in the West Bank of Palestine. I have a children's project there. And the principles that we work on is just what we were talking about earlier. This is very much linked to all of the talks today. The idea of communicative musicality, the idea of coming from mother-infant vocal communication, the idea that through vocal and musical utterance we can share feelings. That either by, I'm going to be really fast, don't worry, share feelings, either by things like mirror neuron activity, or, for example, we have many neural sensors like the separation cry, I'm little lamb lost, we have a neuron to detect that. And so these various things that then will provoke neural correlates, which we've been through. I mean, this has been talked about this morning, and what we would quote is the wonderful literature that Michael and Dr. Shetty quoted, which is this rich soup of neurotransmitter, hormonal and other action that accompanies this. Psychosocial, social and biosocial concerns, very quickly on this one. This is Thailand. This is just over the ocean. This is a part of Thailand just at the very south. The British, when they, in their usual fashion, divided places up for their own advantage, created Burma for the ivory and oil with little scant regard for the local populations, which trapped a huge Thai population in South Burma, South Myanmar. And these are the populations that have been seeping over the border over the last years without any rights. The problem is that the Thai government cannot grant citizenship rights. They would have a war on their hands because they'd all come. So they're drip-fed rights, and so our project is to help these children to express themselves. We write songs about their feelings. I would have more time, I'd sing some of them to you. Anyway, music is an agent of social change, with relaxation, joy, trust, individual creativity, self-expression, self-belief, self-respect, socialization, social communication, collective creativity, social identity, reconciliation, though you can never reconcile people, but a place where reconciliation may take place, social reconstruction. And there is a neuroscience here, an emerging one. We've already talked about it with Michael already today, the implicit social neuroscience of the entrained, of Stephen Fry and the other guy in the opera, but also, as you'll be very, very aware, a big raft of new neuroscience of intersubjectivity, in other words, how indeed we help one another feel the same thing and understand one another, and that stretched forward to broader social issues. So there we are. I'm not going to go on to the rest of it because it's lunchtime, but I do have some nice clips that might signpost our issues of the afternoon of cognition, emotion, language, movement, and so on. Some nice, very short clips that will show in action that. So thank you very, very much.